Good evening. I am Colleen Anderson, the Director of Internships and Externship Program at Christopher Columbus High School in Miami, Florida. Tonight, the Columbus Connects Digital Speaker Series is hosting a webinar on careers in business, sales, and marketing. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, our internship and externship program is currently on hold as we await the safe reopening of our city and economy. The health and safety of our students and the entire Columbus family is our main concern. We are supplementing the internship and externship program with the Columbus Connects Digital Speaker Series. The purpose of the webinars is to bring real-life career experiences and guidance to our explorers who are at home. I am proud to introduce a very distinguished alumni that will be presenting to us this evening. Kevin Testa is from the class of '95. After Columbus, he graduated from the University of Florida, and then he received his MBA from Wake Forest University. Kevin is a managing partner of Grain and Barrel Spirits. He is planning a presentation on career paths in business, sales, marketing, and general management. We'll also have some time for some Q&A afterwards. Kevin is a very familiar face around Columbus. He is involved in the mentoring program, school-wide branding, and marketing initiatives. On behalf of Christopher Columbus High School, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge of this industry with our students. And Kevin, I'll let you take it from here. Kevin, do you want to go ahead and take it from here? I'll just wait a second here for Kevin. Technical issues, what are you going to do? This should be a great evening tonight. I think that it's great to hear from alumni and get their experiences. Our students really resonate to this experience. And I think that there's so much to learn from people who've walked through your steps before. Kevin is very approachable, again, very familiar face around campus. You guys, I'm sure, have met him or seen him around in the past, whether it's at a sporting event on campus, or one of our social events, or just kind of walking the hallways as sometimes he does. I think that this summer is not our normal summer. Usually all of our interns and externs are out on experiences by now, but we're going to do the best we can with bringing this to you at Columbus. Kevin's back. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Kevin. And
I hope that wasn't me. Was that me?
I have no idea, but the good news is you're here and we're ready to go.
All right. So yeah. So look, I appreciate the time, and Colleen, I did nothing formal, and I want to make this as as you said, as interactive. So just stop me wherever I came back to Miami. Whatever, it's 2020. I came back probably almost 7-8 years ago from living in a couple of different places, and got back involved with Columbus, and especially with a lot of the alumni activity. And I think that we do a lot of things really well, especially when we talk to the doctors and some of the the kids that are interested in getting into medicine. We do really well talking about the kids that went into law with our group of lawyers. And then when it just came to like business, we talked about business as this big bucket, right? And we just said business, right? And so and I think in the reality of it is there's so many different components in there and so many different facets of the business that that we can talk about. So I figured I wanted to give you I'll give you my story, how and where I got to Columbus, where I went afterwards, and then we'll just make it as interactive as possible. So I came from St. John Newman. So back then we were called the God Squad, which most people don't even know, which is pretty funny. So came to Columbus from St. John Newman. If you don't know St. John Newman, it's a tiny little school. So I think there was 15 boys or something like that. And you get to Columbus, where there was 400 people, right? Or 400 in the introductory, freshman class, whatever it was. Very overwhelming, right? And so I played football. for 4 years, not very good, but I played football. So as you come, right, you start to meet new people, right? And that's kind of like, part of what tonight is about is connections and people that you meet throughout your life or throughout your career, right? So started at St. John Newman, played football, joined, I think I was in Spanish Honor Society and all these other different groups. But the point of it is that as you join different organizations, you're meeting new people and constantly coming across new people in life, call them connections, right? And so I didn't have Moss Scholars back then. There was National Honor Society. I don't think I was part of National Honor Society. I think I just missed it. So I just saw my graduation picture. I had the straight blue gown, whatever that is, that's what I had. So I didn't have any ropes and didn't have any of the white stuff. So I did well at Columbus. I don't think I set any records for sure in terms of GPA. Did get into University of Florida, was wise enough to not choose FSU for sure. So got into UF, and I think like most folks, right, is I use as an example, I use my brother and I use some of my best friends. My brother's an airline pilot, Columbus guy also, went to the University of Florida as well, went to Columbus, but knew overwhelmingly he was going to go to UF and get a degree and immediately become a pilot and go and work for an airline, right? Good, one of my best friends knew to go to, eventually ended up at University of Miami, but knew he was going to be, right? And then I think there was a ton of people like us who know where we were going to, what we were going to end up doing, but knew that we were going to end up in some of business, right? And so got to UF, I think I changed my major probably at least 4 or 5 times. Started out as, my father's an accountant, started as an accountant. I think at one point I was a computer science major. And then I eventually settled in on finance. And so I graduated in 1995 from Columbus, 99 from UF. And if you know anything, I know this sounds really old, but they were called Wall Street, right? Charlie Sheen and Charlie Sheen and what was his name? Kirk, one of the Douglas. And so it was about Wall Street, right? And that's all I ever wanted to do. So when you talk about externship, when I got to UF, I was immediately focused on working for Merrill Lynch and working for Morgan Stanley. And that was my dream. My dream was, if you ever knew anything about the movie Wall Street, it was about these high-powered bankers on Wall Street, and that's all I ever really wanted to do. I wanted to be a floor trader. I wanted to end up, in New York working on the floor, and it didn't happen. So, and I think is most people will, talk about their career as a kind of a horizontal axis or a straight line. And the reality of it is it's not a straight line. It's not a horizontal axis. There's a lot of twists. There's a lot of turns. You make decisions and sometimes you have to change course. And I did that just even in college. So probably my sophomore, junior year, got an internship with Merrill Lynch up in West Palm Beach. I interned at their office, kind of fulfilled everything that I knew I wanted. Sat with the broker day in and day out. And again, this is back in the early 90s. Coming out of you guys again. So you go back in history, that was coming out of a huge, an early recession in the early 90s, which built into this, to the late 90s, which is one of the greatest periods of kind of economic growth in the history. This is Clinton's second term. So the economy was on fire and business was good for everybody. So anyway, interned for Merrill Lynch. I think now I get into my senior year, I interned at another Merrill Lynch branch in Jacksonville, Florida. And so anyways, graduation comes around. I think I had 4 or 5 offers. I can't remember, but one was Morgan Stanley, one was Merrill Lynch, one was maybe whoever, Schwab, right? And this is a long time ago. I think the starting salary was $27,000 or $28,000 a year, something like that. And I think it's a good reminder is, for everybody is you start at the bottom. I mean, $25,000 a year, $27,000 a year is not a whole lot of money. But you start at the bottom. And so I was a part of a group at University of Florida where we hosted the job fairs. So we hosted a job fair at the O'Connell Center, which is kind of like the basketball dome. And my life, and it took a turn. So I was walking in and I opened the door for a woman and a man. And they said, well, you should come talk to us about a job. And I said, nah, I'm good. I don't need a job. I got a job with Merrill Lynch. And they said, no, you should come talk to us. And everything changed. And so my first lesson that I learned is open doors for people, both, as a metaphor and in real life, right? Because you never know what could happen. And the company was a winery. So the guy said, come talk to me. So I go talk to the guys. It was the E&J Gallo Winery. And I might've had a glass of wine. I definitely drank a lot of beer, drank, a lot of everything else, but I don't think I'd ever had any wine. And that, the guy said, hey, here's our sales management degree. It's a management program. Here's how it's going to start. Here's the track you're going to go on, all this kind of jazz. And you're like, yeah, I don't drink wine, man. I really have no concept of what you're talking about. I drink Coors. And one thing led to another, and I ended up going to work for a winery. And so, I think the first lesson in life, that for me, it was all I ever wanted to do was to be a trader in New York and be a stockbroker back then. Now they're called portfolio managers, whatever it is. But huge detour. I ended up working for a winery, right? And so went to go work for the E&J Gallo Winery. It's the largest winery in the world. Make all kinds of different things that you're probably either familiar, or if you're not 21, you're hopefully not familiar with them. But all kinds of different products, and it was an opportunity for me. Again, so started at the bottom. I mean, part of, I'd say the second lesson I would tell you guys is, however smart you think you are, however well connected you think you are, you went to Columbus, you're connected. You get nowhere without hard work. And it is all about the work ethic and what you're willing to do to go to the next level and to go places. And so all you can hope to do is to be affiliated with someone that enables you to do that. And that's what I saw in Gallo. And that's what's in, my first, again, aside from, I'm going to give you a couple of different thoughts. One is hold doors for people, but second is look for, when you're interning, especially and externing and looking for a job, look for industry leaders, right? So what I learned and why I picked, other advice I give everybody is when you go on interviews, is they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them, right? Why do you want to go give this company the next 20 years or 10 years of your life or whatever, is all your time, Monday through Friday? Why do you want to give your time to that company? You better come and you better interview them as much as you're interviewing, as much as they're interviewing you. And what I learned, looking at Gallo this was a category leader. Again, you might not know who Gallo is, but it's the largest winery in the world. And when I say look for industry leaders, category leaders, right? You look for thought-leading, industry-leading brands. Coca, Nestle, Nabisco, right? Procter & Gamble. In the banking space, Morgan Stanley, right? These are industry leaders. And the reason why you look for industry leaders is it's pretty intuitive. There's a reason why they're number one, right? And the reason why they're number one is there's a process there. There's a philosophical DNA to that organization that you want to learn and be a part of, right? Because this, what you guys are entering is very different than what I entered, and versus what Mar and anyone else entered is, I graduated in the late 90s. So if, in the 70s and 80s, you graduated high school, you competed with the guys in your high school at Columbus, and you got a job and you probably stayed there 35, 40 years, you retired and you went down to the Keys and bought a boat, and right. That's not the world that you're going to go into. All right. It's kind of the world. I feel like our generation, again, like 90s was, right on the cusp of you can stay at that company for 30 years, or what you learn from that company, and then you go start a business of your own. Right. And so, and that was my generation. I think for you guys coming up you're going to have to be multifaceted. You're going to have to be able to do lots of different things, because working 30 years for an organization and staying there in a pension and retiring is virtually nil, right? So look for category leaders, look for leaders in whatever field that they're in, and that would be a piece of advice I give folks, and that's why I chose Gallup. Rambling, Colleen, or do you?
Yeah, I selfishly want to kind of go backwards a couple of minutes. Very interested on internships. How did you get it? How did you decide where you were going to get it? Was it paid? Did you get college credit for it? Is it something that you got through University of Florida, like through career planning and placement or an internship fair? I'm selfishly asking this because we have a lot of young Columbus alumni who had great internship set up. I know this year is unprecedented, COVID and everything else going on, social distancing. A lot of our students lost their opportunities and our alumni. But going back, what is the takeaway? What was the process and what was the takeaway? I know that you pivoted in your career. You really wanted to go with Morgan Stanley, but going through that process as a young kid with no experience, what was your takeaways from that?
Yep. So this is why I was telling you the St. John. So I graduated from St. John Newman in a class of 30 people. I think there was 14, but it was probably half girls, half boys, right? And then you get to Columbus. So you think about, and again, the term networking gets people with a bad taste in their mouth. Like they think of networking events as these cheesy, almost like, these events where just guys sit around and pass around business cards and et cetera, right? But that's not what networking is, right? It's the magnification of yourself, and it's meeting more and more people, which are going to open, again, the metaphor of opening more and more doors, right? So St. John Newman, 30 people. You play football, you meet another 100 guys. I always just use guys because of clubs. You meet 100 guys. You graduate Columbus, you have a graduating class of 400. You go to UF 50,000 undergrad. There's 10,000 in your class at UF. These are 10,000 more people. Now, I didn't join a fraternity at UF. There's, SAE and, all the other fraternities or whatever. I didn't join a social fraternity. But to your question, Colleen, is I joined probably my sophomore year, maybe junior year, I joined one of the business fraternities. So I found the business fraternity extremely helpful. There's two of them. I think ours was Delta Sigma Pi, called AK Psi, I think. And it's called a fraternity, but it's mostly, it's like a business club, if you will. But so what is that? It's more connections and it's more doors that are open for you. So the point of it is I think one of the internships came through a family, through my dad, right? Which I think it's, people embarrassed to admit it, but whatever, that's how you get internships, right? I think one guy knew my dad, but then the second one came through UF, through the business fraternity, right? And that was the Morgan Stanley one. So the point I'm espousing is make sure you affiliate yourselves with as many people in as many different organizations. Why? Because one is you want to learn, right? You want to learn, and those are all people, those are all connections, those are all doors that can be open to possibilities that you don't even know about, like working for a winery. I had no idea that I would ever end up working for a winery. It happened because you open a door for somebody, right? And where are you going to get? It happened that I joined this business club at, another kid at Georgetown. I get an internship, right? And so the point of it is, I think, is I use the example on my cell phone. The first 5 people on my phone are my wife, my mother and father, and then the other, maybe it's 6, and then the other 4 are all Columbus guys I graduated with, right? So it's my brother, my father from Columbus, and then my mother and father. And then there's 2,500 other contacts that are people I've met over my career that I go to for a lot of different things. And part of what I'll tell you, Colleen, is what I think is important is before you ask for something, give something. All right. And what I mean by that is I'm a big believer in, my analogy is it's a bank, right? Networking and meeting people and how you're going to get an internship it's a bank. You don't take money out of the bank unless you put money into the bank. Okay. And what I mean by that is, well, how am I going to meet people? How am I going to network? Come to a Columbus event. Come to one of our events when we're allowed to meet again. Come to one of our events. Alumni want to help you. Come, literally. I mean, this is a silly example. We have the food and wine event. We have the pig roast. Come work at the pig roast. Come work at the food and wine festival and volunteer for a day. Every CEO, every powerful other business guy in the world in Miami is there, and you never know. All right, you never know who you're going to meet, and if you went to Columbus, you're in, right? And it's just a matter of, I think, of broadening your horizons and making sure that you're talking to all the people that they're possible to talk to. So, long answer to a short question.
Actually, now going into another question. You talk about coming back to Columbus, coming to some of these events, and which leads me into, you're very involved in the mentorship program. You and I've had conversations about mentoring. So if you're a young Columbus alum, you're back from University of Florida, or you're back from FSU or wherever you are, and you're back in Miami, what's your next play? If you didn't get a job at college, how can the mentor program help you? How can, obviously it's not guaranteed job placement, but what does the mentorship program at Columbus do?
Yeah. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 different guys that I've, mentored or mentoring. I tell you is unequivocally, don't think of it as a one. Well, so one, firstly, is just so everyone knows that whoever's listening, is every year we have more mentors than mentees. All right. So what does that tell you? Philosophically, it tells you there's overwhelmingly people that want to help you. Right. So just supply. If you want to be a business guy, there's supply and demand. Okay. There's more mentors than we have mentees. What does that mean? That means the guys from Columbus that have jobs or run the companies that you want to work for, they're dying to help you. We're dying to help you. Not enough people are asking for help, right? So just start there. You're not anybody, right? And I tell you, that's the first, more mentors than mentees. That tells you all you need to know, right? You're not being a nuisance, one. Secondly, is I tell everyone that I've ever been with, is it's a two-way street. I'm also Italian, so you're going to do a favor for me one day, I'm going to come ask you for a favor, like Don Corleone said, right? Meaning, look, I'm going to help you now, but I'm probably down the road and ask you for a favor down the line, right? And I'll give you an example. 2 of my mentees, right? One guy is an incredible, without naming names, is an incredible physical shape. I helped him a little bit trying to get started. He helped me get back in shape. Right. He helped me, we went and worked out together. He was my trainer. It was great. So it's a two-way street, right? Another guy, he's involved in athletics, quote unquote. He was my mentor. He was the mentee. I was the mentor. It could have been the other way around. I learned just as much from that guy as he learned from me. So don't view it as one being a nuisance, because again, we have way too many. We don't have enough mentees. We have enough mentors that we can't even get enough of y'all in the program, one. And 2 is I expect to learn something from you. And I expect you to teach me something. So, that's my philosophy on it.
Awesome. I guess we could say that's the brotherhood at work.
Yeah.
So going back to I'm sorry I interrupted you, but going back to your presentation and your discussion, sorry. So your career path. So you thought you were going to be a stockbroker, a portfolio manager. You had it all figured out. You opened up the right door for the right person, and boom, they're offering you an opportunity to get involved in a winery and going through a program. So what happened after that?
So I moved back to Palm Beach. I was in Palm Beach for like 2 or 3 years as part of the entry level again. So I would tell you is, guys, you're going to have at the bottom. I know you think you're going to make $150,000. You're not, right? And the reason why you're not is because you're not worth it, right? And it's supply and demand, right? It takes time in order for you to be worth that kind of money. So start at the bottom. I was, literally a distributor sales, took wine bottles out of a box and I put them on a shelf. It's about as sexy of a job as you could possibly imagine. And why am I espousing? Why am I telling you? I'm telling you to start at the bottom because that's the nuts and bolts of whatever business you want to get into. If you want to get into it, again, when you say business, there's operations, there's IT, there's marketing, there's finance. If you want to get into marketing, they're going to stick you at this level analyst job, and you're going to work till midnight at night doing what you think are the most menial tasks in the world, but you're learning something, right? And you're building towards something. So that's what I would tell you. So I started there. And then what was really, what I learned, I'm born and raised in Miami. I had really never been anywhere outside of Miami. And so I moved to Charleston, South Carolina first. I lived in Charleston for about a year. Started business in South Carolina for the state. And then again, so what I'm telling you is the network of people that you're meeting throughout your career starts to grow and grow and grow exponentially, right? So you're working in the liquor and the alcohol business here in Florida. Then you move to South Carolina. I meet, a whole set of people up there. I worked there. I was there for about a year and a half. I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. It's about 3.5 hours away from Charleston. Moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. Got married. And so my other analogy I'll give you is your career is like a car, right? So the reason why your dad probably bugs you to put oil in your car, right, is that if you don't put oil in your car, what happens, right? The engine locks up and it freezes and your car doesn't, won't run. And so your career is that car. If you don't put oil in your car, in your career, it's going to sputter out and die at some point, right? So what I did when I was in Charlotte is I went back. At that point, I had been out like 7 years. I think it was 2002 or maybe 2003, and I went back to business school and I went to Wake Forest up in the Carolinas. And so I'd like to tell you I graduated from Florida with a respectable GPA, and I probably didn't. It was probably in the twos. It was not something that I'm proud of. But going back to business school for me was really a way to proverbially put oil back in the car and really learn and go back and hone skills and really, because I think for me, a business school is the time when you get to like dive. I really like operations management. I really like IT. I'm a marketing guy, whatever it is. And so, and I would tell you is I think it's important that you go get your undergrad and come into the real world for 2 to 5 years. Took me a little bit longer, but then come back and if you're going to go get a master's, come back and get your master's. The reality of it is, I think if you go straight from a bachelor's degree into master's, is you don't know anything. You don't have any real life experience. And so, and for me it was great. Again, it was a chance to put some oil in the car, all of these different things, right? So when you get your degree, your undergrad, when you go get a master's, I think to me, it's again, enabling you it's enabling for you to do something previously not going to be able to do, right? So the thought is, if I go to college, I'm going to be able to get a job that I would not be able to get if I didn't go to college, right? So the same thing, I think for me is like when I went to MBA is I went and got an MBA because I wanted to do certain things in my career that I probably wasn't going to be able to unless I got an MBA. And that's what it did for me. So, and again, so as you move along, right, as you think about every 3 to 4 years, think about what you're doing, whether it's an internship, et cetera, is think about pausing and doing something for yourself. Again, the metaphor of depositing into the bank, deposit into your bank, into your career. Because if you keep taking out of it and you don't replenish, right? And that's what the business school was for me. So anyways, after I was in Charlotte, and so I spoke enough Spanish to, I'm a gringo, but I spoke enough Spanish to fool people. And so because of my language ability is what they said, they sent me. And so, and this is literally how things happen, right? They said, well, do you speak Spanish? This is Gallo. I was still working for the Gallo winery. They said, do you speak Spanish? I said, I do. They said, well, would you like to move to Tokyo? I said, yeah, but I said, how is that going to help me in Japan? And they said, well, it means you can learn another language, right? And so when you look at, and that's how sometimes things work, right? That's just how someone said, well, how'd you end up here? Like it was some grand strategy plan and it was, you really earned it. No, I got the job because I opened the door for somebody. And then I got sent to Japan because I spoke Spanish, right? So I got sent to Japan to run our Asia business. I managed, 250 people. I was 30 years old. I managed the whole division in Asia. I had never left the United States and had to go get a passport and was there for 3 years. My son was born in Japan. Traveled to, I don't know, I had to get a second passport. I think I've been to over 50 countries. I had India. I opened up India for Gallo, Sri Lanka. Been to places I didn't even know existed. All selling wine and alcohol, right? So, and again, I think the idea is no vision of ever, short of watching James Bond movies and things like that. I never even knew of these places, and so, but got a chance to go all over the world and get some fantastic stomach diseases along the way, stomach viruses along the way. But yeah, so India, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, Maldives, etc. So, and then I got sent back to California to the winery. I worked at the corporate headquarters for about a year. I was doing just a general management project for the CEO, and then I got sent to, and then I was there for a year, and my wife and I are finally, my wife's from Tampa, so we said, we really wanted to move back to the U.S., and so back to the U.S. and I got back involved with Columbus. So I think the moral of the story I would tell you on that is like it's not a linear line, and it's very curvy, and it goes in places. If you would have told me that my son was going to be born in Japan, I would have told you, right? And all those things happen because along the way, go back to this idea of opening doors and networking and meeting people. And it starts with Columbus, man. I mean, honestly, like our mentorship program, and it's a two-way street. It's absolutely a two-way street. If you're just going to go ask, talking to the younger ones, that's not the way it works. I want you to come give, and then we're going to say, hey, what do you want? Right. But it's not until you make a deposit that you can take out money. If you think you're just going to come take, it's not the way it works.
Kevin, so can I pause for a second?
Yeah, sorry.
No, you have such an interesting career path. So it took you in so many different places. And so as a recent Columbus grad, or if you're in Columbus, you're in your first, second, third year of college, graduating, thinking you're going to come back home to the 305 and start your career, it's not really an accurate picture, it seems like, especially for you. So should these recent grads, these young kids, really be open to the idea of moving? Would you say being open to that is really a game changer?
Yeah. So I'm full of analogies. The analogy there, right, is so it's you think of a filter, right? Think of a filter on whatever, if you're searching for whatever you're searching for online, right? Whether it's a hotel room, a flight, right? Whatever. I want to fly to New York, right? And if you go to Expedia or whatever website it is, and you say, I want to fly to New York, and you put on the flexible day button, right? It finds the cheapest flight throughout the entire month to New York, right? If you put, I want to fly to New York on Tuesday at 5 p.m., what are you doing? You're limiting yourself to your options, right? You're limiting yourself to your choices. So what you just said, Colleen, is if you say, I'm coming back to Miami, yeah, great, no problem. You just put a filter on your career, right? You just put a filter on what you're able to attain, right? And so I think that's one of the biggest analogies I tell people is, I love Miami, back here, right? It's fantastic. there's a whole other world out there. One, there's a whole other world out there. And the other thing I tell you is what a lot of people aren't thinking about right now is I have a lot of buddies, a lot of friends. Everyone loves, oh man, I get to work virtual now, man. It's awesome. Man, I don't have to go to the office. I work on my computer. I've always worked online virtual. I had an office at some as a sales manager. Typically you're always out and about on an airplane or a hotel. So I've always worked, kind of remote. But everyone now that loves the remote working thing, I'm gonna help you with the future, because there's a lot that work remote. The Philippines, and they live in India, and they live in Korea, and they'll work for 1/3. They'll work for 1/10 of what you want to work for, and they speak, and they have an MBA, and they'll work their ass off, right? And so that's my mantra is. This is why I told you the story is. When I graduated high school, it's just me competing with the other guys from Columbus, right? And then you go to UF and you're basically competing with all the pool of people was really whoever went to UF, right? This crowd, whoever we're talking to here, you're competing against everybody, and they're coming to eat your lunch. Like they're going to outwork you. They're going to work for less money than you. Why? They got the same dream you have. Right. And they're hungry. And so that's, this whole thing of working remote is fantastic. Oh man, I love it. Oh, I don't have to sit in traffic anymore, work remote. What value do you add to the organization? What do you bring to the table? Right. And that's the way you think of it, because I'm telling you, I've seen it. I mean, I had 250 people in Japan that worked for us in our division. We sent jobs to the Philippines. We had accountants making $150,000 a year, $200,000 a year. We hired the same people with MBAs that spoke English in the Philippines for $24,000 a year. That's the job of the business, is to find the assets that business needs at the cheapest price possible. If you don't, you better be prepared. You're working against every one of those Korean kids. You're working against every one of those Indian kids, because they're all coming. So get ready. Not to scare anybody, but that's real life. So.
Wow. It's the truth, right?
Yeah. And I think it's like, it's a lot of what value do you bring to the organization? Now, again, I know I'm talking maybe over some folks' heads, guys are real young, but when you go to UF, don't just look side to side. That's what I could have done. I could only look at the guys and girls next to me, because that's who I was only really competing with. You guys are competing with every Indian, every Filipino, every Korean, and they work, and they're smart, and watch out. So let it be something that motivates you, not scares you.
Okay, so on that being said, okay, so you said in the beginning of this job, you for most part, you could say it was like kind of not fun. You were stocking shelves. You really started at the bottom.
It was awful.
If I'm at my first job and I'm started at the bottom and I'm watching the clock tick and I'm really not enjoying myself, I don't think this is for me. I think I'm smarter than what I'm being paid for or what I'm asked to do. What is your advice for staying in that position? How long do you stay in that position? How do you transition out of that position?
Yeah. So I tell people, I think there's two things. So firstly is my analogy of depositing to the bank, et cetera. So when you start any position, there's a cycle, right? And I use the analogy of driving a car all the time. So for the first 3 months of a job, college, big loan there is. For the first 3 months of that gig, it's as if you're driving a car and the hood inexplicably popped up, and now you're driving with the hood popped up, right? So I don't think it's ever happened to me, but you can imagine driving a car with the hood popped up. You're just going to be running things over, right? You're going to be hitting things, running things over, not knowing what you hit, et cetera, right? So then you get to about 6 months in, right? So then about 6 months into your job or college or whatever, the proverbial hood ripped off, right? So now you're driving, the engine's exposed, and now you're just looking, I tell people, like You're not looking out into the distance. You're looking at like at the very tip of your hood, right? And so as you're looking at the tip of your hood, you're still hitting things, but you're like, oh, I just hit a kid. Oh, I just hit a dog. At least you know what you ran over, right? And in about a year and a half, you start to and go, oh my God, there's a kid. Oh my God, there's a dog, right? And you can swerve and you can avoid the kid or the dog, etc. And about 2 years in, 2.5 to 3 years in, my analogy is you're driving the car and you're like, oh, wait a minute, at this turn, I know there's always children. I should veer to the left, hit them, right? And I think whether it's your job or whether it's college, but certainly you asked about your job, that's the way it works. The first 3 months, you're like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I got sent to Japan. 3 months in, I'm oh my, I am so far out of my league here. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I got this job. I'm going to embarrass myself, right? 6 months in, you're like, yeah, man, I don't know. I think I can at least fake it till I make it, right? And that's the proverbial, the hood ripped off, right? So at least I was still hitting stuff, but at least I knew what I was hitting. And then you get to 2 years in where you can anticipate, and the anticipation piece is when you know you're good. So to your point about, Colleen, the question is when you're at a gig, and at that point you're working for them, right? Meaning you've already learned a lot of what you're going to learn, and now you're paying back. That's when you're probably ready for another challenge, right? Once you've learned that skill or whatever you're doing, that's probably time to move on to something else. And so for me, is every 1.5 to 2 years, I always tried to move on to do something else, because at that point I learned what I was going to learn, and selfishly, again, you're managing. I tell people all the time, you're going to meet when you get to college, right, and when you get to a job, one of you are going to inevitably say, oh well, I'm going to see what the counselor says, the career counselor. Oh, and then when you get to your job, it's going to be HR. Okay, it's going to be famous words, human resources. Okay, think of that term, human resources, right? They manage the people at the company. Oh well, let me just see what human resources has for me and for a job. And what I always tell people is, listen, if you think human resources or that college counselor is rolling around at night thinking about you, man, they ain't thinking about you, right? They got a lot of other stuff going on. You got to manage your career, and you got your internship, your externship, your career like you do your job, right? You got to put as much thought and as much work into your job, into your career as you do your job. I promise you, no one else is thinking as much as you are. So.
Okay, we received another question. What type of skills would be important to master as you start to enter the business world?
What type of skills to master?
Yeah.
Yeah. I go to the analogy of Indians and West, Indians and Koreans. You're competing now against everybody, right? And so one, you're competing against everybody, but you're also competing against automation, right? So this tidal wave of 5G is coming, right? And so you're competing against, not only are you competing against other people, you're going to be competing against machines, and you're going to be competing against computers and AI. Learn faster than you, and inevitably will be smarter than all of us, right? So one of the things that I haven't started yet, again, I admittedly need oil in my car, so I need to practice what I preach. It's been probably 6-7 years for me. I need to go back and go do something. But I think is creativity. So what I keep reading about in terms of the way to prepare yourself for the next wave of automation, etc., is really creativity, because anything that can be automated will be automated, right? So my brother's a pilot, right? Too hard to imagine the day when there's one pilot, right? It's also not too hard to imagine the day when there might not be any pilots, right? 3D printing, right? It's not too hard in the future to imagine a day when you can print off a fork. When you need a new fork in the kitchen, you don't have to go to the store to go buy a fork. But think about what that means is if you don't need a fork at your house, it also means you don't need a guy running the business forks. You also need a delivery truck for a guy to the delivery truck, you know, the Amazon fork to your house. So it's creativity, I think, in that's what can't be replicated, and that's what can't be digitized, and that's what can't be automated is creativity. So artistry of some sort. And I am the worst, man. I draw stick figures. I'm with that. So that's what I'm going to work on, because I think that's where, you know, I think what I always tell people is, you know, it's anticipating, right? It's the same thing as anticipating of what's coming around the corner when you're, you know, navigating your career, but it's also anticipating. And when you start in sales, they teach you anticipating objections, right? What that means is, if I'm going to sell somebody something, before I even sell him anything, I know what he's going to tell me. I already know how he's going to tell me he doesn't want it. So before I go in there and before I try to sell him, I've already in my mind rehearsed. I know the 3 things he's going to tell me, right? And I've already 3 ways to get around that, right? Same thing for your career, and the same thing. So when you go in, right, look at your resume, be objective. What are the 3 things that they're going to tell me about my resume, right? And I'm making this up. Do you speak Spanish? No, I don't speak Spanish. Go learn Spanish, right? Like, if you're trying to get a job in Miami, you don't speak Spanish, you know, good luck. Right? So anticipate the objections, right? And take those off the table, right? So that's one of the biggest things I always say is, I think, is if you anticipate what those, I know that's not easy sometimes, you know, I think that's the first thing I always say is anticipate what someone is going to tell you, and then take that off the table and take it away from them. So.
Awesome. Okay, I have another question. I don't know if I'm throwing you off topic here, but when I have students, I do one-on-one meetings with them. Normally we're at campus, they come into my office, have some candy and chat and talk about what they might want to do over the summer. Didn't happen this summer, we're doing them on Zoom. But my question is, I have so many young men who come into the office, and some are like, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a researcher, which is great. An engineer, great. But I would say we have at least almost half the kids come in and say, Miss, I would like a internship or externship in business. And I say, okay, well, what type of business? Like, are you interested in marketing? Are you interested in accounting? Are you interested in finance? Are you interested in, you know, what are you looking at? And they kind of all look at me a little like, well, I mean, I guess accounting is good, but I don't really like math, or I guess this is good. And so, you know, talking about business and careers in business, what do you think are good career fields to start in? If you're going to apply to University of Florida today and you want to apply into the School of Business, career tracks, different degrees in business, different careers in business that these kids could take an opportunity to look in. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I love Miami. I love living here. What you don't really get in Miami, where you get in a lot of other places around the country, is we really lack. I mean, we have some Fortune 100, 200 companies here. We have some obviously big banks that are geared. I mean, this is a services hub, and then this is a banking hub, right? So most of the banking is directed towards Latin America, South America. And then everything else is really services, airlines, you know, tourism, right? So whereas when you live in Chicago, or you live in Atlanta, or you live in Dallas, right, there's huge multinational companies, right? HP, Procter and Gamble, Kroger, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so within these, you know, you go to Bentonville, Arkansas. I mean, that's the home of Walmart, right? Yes, they're a retailer that sells shoes and, you know, gummy bears and all kinds of different stuff. But within that organization is tens of thousands of people, human resource people, IT people, operation people, finance people, accountants. And, you know, so I think I think what I would say is you think you know, but you don't know, right? So you clearly, you know, I use an analogy a lot of, I think your career is a lot like It's a lot like a buffet line, right? Do they still have a buffet at Columbus? I haven't been to lunch in a while. I think there's still a buffet, right?
Yes, buffet.
Okay, all right. So the analogy of the buffet is some things on the buffet look really good, right? I mean, sometimes the pizza looks really good, and then sometimes you go on the buffet and you're like, man, that looks like that's been sitting there for over 3 hours. I don't think I'm going to eat that, right? But the analogy there is typically when you walk through a buffet, you get a tray, right? You get a plate. You walk down this buffet line and you put, and I love a good buffet, as you can tell. But as you go down this buffet line, is you put a scoop. Hey, the mac and cheese looks good. You put the mac and cheese on your plate. Hey, the green beans look good. You put the green beans on your plate. Man, that meat looks like it's been sitting here for days. I live right by Blue Sky. I love Blue Sky. You make a determination every time you eat a Blue Sky whether you're going to get sick or not, right? And I love Blue Sky. I hope no one from Blue Sky is listening. But the point, evaluate all that food they got out there. You're like, man, I don't know. That looks suspect right there, right? And the point of this buffet analogy is by the end of your career, you have a plate of food that you put together, and it's all things that you want, right? So to your point about what internship to pick, right? And should you pick this or should you pick that? Do it. And if you love it, great. Now you know you love it, right? That's mac and cheese that you look good. So guess what? Go back and get a second helping of mac and cheese. If you didn't, great. Now you know you're not supposed to be an accountant, right? And I think so much of that comes into like in about your second or third year at school, right? Because that's your first 2 years of college. You're taking intro to accounting, you're taking astrology, Russian masterpieces, and all these types of classes, right? It's the third and fourth year when you hone in on, okay, you start taking I remember like an operations class, and I highly doubt anyone's really thought of the logistics operations track for a career, right? Enormously interesting, enormously complex. Imagine putting together FedEx or UPS and all the moving parts that go into that, right? You never know, take that class, right? And so I think that's that comes into your like in your third or fourth year where you learn like, okay, I like this or I don't like that. And there's inevitably, look, I had jobs or I've had an internship that was not fun. I was like, guess what? I ain't never doing that again, right? So you move on, and at the end, again, if the green beans don't taste good, don't eat them, right? Something else.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, we have a question for you. Peter Cooper, class of 2014. What are the most important factors involved in successfully selling a product to restaurants?
To restaurants specifically? Well, yeah, I sell products right now to restaurants. It's not easy right now, as you can imagine. I think, if you're selling to restaurants, you're talking about a B2B business, right? So B2B means business to business, B2C means business to customer, right? So, Blue Sky sells, sandwiches to customers. B2B with me, you're selling to Blue Sky. So, was it what was it called? Way, or what's the recommendation?
It says, what are the most important factors involved in successfully selling a product to restaurants?
Yeah, I think so. It's exactly what we talked about, right? So before we sell to these guys, we do business. We just got all of our products into Hooters, right? We just got all of our products into Duffy's, right? Before I go meet with Duffy's, right, I spend 2 days preparing. I prepare the presentation. I bring samples. I do all these things, or the guys that work for us do, and before you anticipate the objection. Okay, the minute when I go sit down with the guy from Duffy's, first thing he's going to tell me, he's going to talk to me about price. He's going to talk to me about there's other things out there that are cheaper, this, that, the other. I've already anticipated everything he's going to tell me about that, and I've already in my mind I let him ask me. I set him up for it. I let him ask me, and then I overcome his objection. So I think to the question there is you're selling, right? If it's a restaurant, it's probably food or wine, or it's a plate or something. It's a lot of commodity products, right? So they can buy anybody. They can buy plates from anybody. Why is your plate better, right? If you're talking pure sales technique type stuff, is you talk features to benefits, okay? Don't just tell the guy this is the perfect example of this is iPhones, right? So the iPhone's not phone on the market, right? But I would venture to say I have a Mac computer, I have an iPhone. I bet you it's 85% of the people on this have a Mac, or sorry, have an iPhone. The reason why we have an iPhone is because Apple doesn't talk about gigabytes and it doesn't talk about hertz, and I don't even know. I'm not in download speeds. What does Apple talk about? Apple talks about Apple as a company and innovating and in empowering, creativity. They sell a vision. So if you're selling a restaurant B2B, don't talk about why your plate's better than the other guy's plate. You got to talk about, you got to sell. This is marketing, right? If you're talking, download speeds and whatever, you lose them, right? The B2B conversation is really driving, driving the vision for the product, why your product is differentiated, but also what that means to him. Here's why my product's different, which means to you X, Y, and Z, right? So translating for them.
Awesome. Good. Okay. Question. In the beginning, you were talking about how, we always have in life, we have people who want to be a lawyer, people who want to be a pilot, like your brother, people who want to be a doctor. Then, the majority, we have all these business things. So you go out there, you go to University of Florida, you get your degree, you have a business degree, you're ready to go, you have a big plan. And then you go out and work, and you've been working for a couple years, which I think is the trend with these younger kids, is they go out and work for a little bit, and then they go back for their MBA or law school or whatever it might be. So my question to you is, what was your original degree in the business school at UF? You went out and worked. How did you decide which MBA to get for your career?
Yeah. So I have a finance degree, which inevitably every finance degree was an accounting degree that couldn't get the accounting degree, which was my case. And so, yeah, so I was a finance major at UF, and, it made sense for me to do what I thought I wanted to do. Right. And then I think what will happen if you guys are ever thinking about business school is inevitable. And I went to business. So this is, I went to business school in Charlotte, North Carolina. So if you know anything about Charlotte's a massive banking hub. So it's the home of, at the time was Wachovia, which is now Wells Fargo. And then it's also the home of Bank of America. So two of the biggest, banks in the country. And so the business school, which is not hard to imagine, is all people from Wells Fargo, back then was Wachovia, and B of A. And so inevitably, when you go to business school, they break you up into teams, et cetera. And so on my team, and so when I was interviewing going into business school, I literally asked them, I was like, well, is this just a bunch of bankers, or is this a diverse group of people, in the MBA program? And so she was selling, anticipating objections. And she said, no, they're not just bankers. They're all kinds of different backgrounds, all kinds of different skill sets, et cetera, that come to our MBA program. Okay. So you get in, you go to the first day. Who do you work for? B of A. Who do you work for? I work for Wachovia. Who do you work for? I work for B of A. Yeah, one was an IT guy. Yeah, one HR. Yeah, one was a banker. Yeah, one was an accountant, but they all worked for a bank, right? And so a lot of when you look at a school is look where the school is. No, a lot of the school, again, Wake's a very good program. It's not, it's not Harvard or Penn or any of those, but look at where the schools are, because that'll tell you who's gonna be in that program. Like I said, is they weren't all bankers, but they all work for big banks, right? And so when you go to an MBA program, you inevitably, what ended up happening for us at business school was there was an accountant, there was a banker, there was myself, who was kind of like a general management sales type person, and then I think we might have had an HR in our group as well. Inevitably, what happened was in our group, the accountant and the finance guy would come up with the whole presentation, right? Would come up with all the data for the presentation, and then they would give it to me, and I would go present it and essentially sell it to the entire, when we had to go present for our and stuff. So what I would tell you about an MBA is when you go back, you're trying to learn a skill that you don't have, right? You're trying to add a tool to the toolbox. So don't just go back and do what I did, which is just become the presenter, and again, it was a great experience. It's a phenomenal experience. And it really ended things that I wouldn't be able to do without it. But I did inevitably fall back into the trap of just doing what I knew how to do. You go back to learn a different skill. You go back, and for me I did get a chance to kind of hone some of the quantitative skills, the statistical analysis, et cetera, that I probably didn't get the full benefit of at UF because I was busy doing other things. So.
Okay, I've got that final question. Unless you have anything else you want to add, I have that final question. Shameless plug. How did Columbus prepare you for where you are today?
Yeah, Columbus. I mean, so again, my brother's a Columbus guy. The first 4 people on my phone are all Columbus guys. Columbus for me was the first chance to really understand what a network and what connecting to people was all about, right? And again, I know it sounds a little cheesy, right? But it is. Like, I mean, I came from a small school at St. John's, and then I went to Columbus, which was bigger, and then I went to UF, which was even bigger. But for me, like, again, it opened the door to the world. I mean, I got a chance to go all over the world, and it started in a kind of went to UF and it went to Wake, but it started with those first people that I met there. Not only are we friends to this day, but I've met Columbus people, and I've met Marist people. Don't forget, Columbus is part of the Marist organization. I met a Marist guy in Fiji on a business trip, and we shook hands. He told me he went to Marist High School in I can't remember the name of the capital now, in Fiji. And I said, I went to Marist School in Columbus. We went out to dinner that night and had dinner and drinks all night. The guy's the greatest. We keep in touch this day. Because when you meet a Columbus person, you know what you're going to get, right? Pretty typical, you know what you're going to get. And it's a lifelong thing. We want to help you guys. Like, look, I mean, there's more of us wanting to help than there are you guys asking for help. So Columbus was really the first door that ever opened for me, and opened my eyes to, the bigger world at large, and never look back. And that's why I come back and help in any way I can. So
that's awesome. Well, I wanted to thank Kevin for presenting to us tonight and sharing your knowledge with us. It truly is a testament to our community, the whole Columbus community, to have such successful alumni and families who are willing to give back to the school in so many ways. I wanted to thank Melissa Marty and Omar Delgado for making this evening happen. I wanted to thank our principal, President Tom Kruzak, and our President Tom Kruzak and our principal Dave Pugh for your support, and everyone else for attending tonight. Please be on the lookout this summer. We're going to keep adding more and more webinars to try to give our kids some firsthand experiences and some life lessons, guidance, and advice. Our goal is to put the students out on externships and internships this summer. We just want to make sure everything is safe. So stay tuned, we'll let you know, and everybody have a great night, stay safe, and adelante.